The organ played something that sounded like a funeral. Emma Carter stood at the entrance of a cathedral so large it made her feel like a mistake, like a comma inserted into a sentence that didn't need it, and she thought, I am about to marry a woman I don't love, in a dress that isn't mine, in front of 300 people whose names I will never learn. She was 26 years old. She had imagined her wedding exactly once when she was 19 and briefly, catastrophically, in love with a girl in her drawing class. She had imagined something small, yellow flowers, her father crying in the front row, the smell of grass. What she had instead, white flowers, the color of surrender. A cathedral ceiling so high it swallowed sound. A gown delivered 3 days ago by a courier who handed it over without meeting her eyes, along with a card in handwriting so precise it looked typeset. Wear this. It will be expected. IV. No please, no I hope this fits, just an instruction. Which was, Emma supposed, exactly what this was, an instruction she had agreed to follow. She pressed her hand flat against her stomach. The gown made that difficult, made everything difficult, made breathing a conscious effort, and told herself what she had been telling herself for 3 weeks. This is not a real wedding. This is a transaction. You are not the first person in history to sell something to save someone they love. The doors opened. 300 people turned to look at her. And at the end of the aisle, in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Em's car, stood Isabella Velmont. Emma had looked up Isabella Velmont after their first meeting, had sat in bed at 1 a.m. with her laptop reading profile pieces and board announcements, and a single gossip column entry that called her the most eligible woman in the city and the least interested in being so. She had studied the photographs. She had thought, she looks like someone who has never once been caught off guard. Standing at the altar now, Isabella looked exactly like those photographs. Dark eyes, direct and still, jaw set, posture that suggested the concept of nervousness had never occurred to her as a personal possibility. She was watching Emma walk toward her, not like a woman waiting for the person she loved, like a woman reviewing a contract she had already decided to sign. Emma reached the altar. The priest began speaking. Emma heard nothing. She was listening instead to the sound of her own heartbeat, which was remarkably steady for someone in the middle of the worst practical decision of her life, and to the ambient noise of 300 people watching 2 women pretend that this was real. I do, Emma said when the moment arrived. I do, Isabella said beside her, in a voice as cool and final as a door closing, and just like that, Emma Carter was married. The reception was a masterclass in performance. Isabella touched Emma's hand for photographers. She leaned close and said quiet things that looked like tenderness from 6 feet away and were, in reality, logistical briefings. The Nakamura group is at table 7. Don't let them corner you about the Hong Kong merger. She guided Emma through the crowd with one hand at the small of her back, warm and sure, and Emma focused on not reacting to the warmth. It was just a hand. It was just a performance. It meant nothing. When the last car had gone and the hired car had delivered them to a glass tower in the center of the city, and the elevator had carried them 42 floors up in silence, Isabella walked through the penthouse door, removed her jacket, and said, without looking at Emma, "The guest room is the 3rd door to the left. Breakfast is at 7. I leave by 7:45. A pause. I don't expect you to account for your time. You're not an employee." "Just a wife," Emma said. Something moved in Isabella's shoulders, something small, then just a wife. She walked down the hallway. "Good night, Emma." Emma stood alone in a penthouse that cost more than her entire street, in a dress that wasn't hers, married to a woman she didn't know. She found the guest room. She sat on the edge of a bed with sheets that felt like something she didn't have vocabulary for, and she pressed her hands together in her lap, and she absolutely did not cry. She was not sad, she was practical. In the morning, her father would wake up in St. Michael's Hospital with a surgery date, a paid bill, and a house that was still his. That was the whole point. That was the only point. She turned off the light. 3 weeks earlier. Emma Carter had been sitting in a coffee shop drowning slowly in job listings she'd printed out when the most unsettling woman she had ever seen sat down across from her uninvited. Dark hair, dark eyes, a suit that cost more than Emma's rent, an expression that suggested she had already decided how this conversation would go. "Emma Carter," she said, not a question. "Yes?" "Isabella Velmont." She placed a folded document on the table and slid it forward. "I have a proposal." Emma knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Velmont holdings were on buildings and bridges and hospital wings across the city. Isabella Velmont had taken over from her father at 29 and was currently on the cover of 3 magazines Emma had seen this month alone, always with the same expression she was wearing right now: composed, remote, completely in control of whatever room she occupied. "You need money," Isabella said. "Your father needs cardiac surgery his insurance won't cover. Your family house has a second mortgage due in 6 weeks. You've been declined for 3 loans. Emma's blood went cold. "How do you—" "I have resources," Isabella nodded. "At the document. I'm offering a contract marriage. 1 year. You live in my home, accompany me to professional events, present publicly as my spouse." A pause. "In exchange, your father's surgery, paid in full, your family's debts, cleared, a monthly allowance of $15,000, $200,000 when the year ends." The coffee shop continued around them. Espresso machines, conversation, the ordinary business of Tuesday afternoon. Emma felt none of it. "Why?" she said. "I have my reasons," Isabella said. "That's not an answer." "No," Isabella agreed, "but it's what I have right now." She stood, smoothing her jacket. "Take 24 hours. Read it. There's one thing I want you to hear from me directly, because it's in the contract and I don't want it to be a surprise." Emma waited. "Never expect me to love you," Isabella said. "I will treat you with respect, I will ensure your comfort, but I will not perform feelings I don't have, and I don't want you performing them either." Her dark eyes held Emma's, steady and unflinching. "If you sign knowing exactly what this is." She left without looking back. Emma sat for a very long time. Then she read the contract. Then she visited her father, who held her hand and said, "The beginning of a thing doesn't have to be the whole story." Then she signed. The cold house was, objectively, beautiful. Emma spent the first 2 months noticing this from a careful distance. The paintings on the walls, real ones she recognized too. The books organized with precision that suggested they were actually read. The grand piano in the living room that gathered dust in a way that felt like grief. They were extraordinarily good at not being in the same room. Isabella left early and came home late. When she was present, she was behind a closed study door or on a call or moving through the apartment with the directional efficiency of someone who had optimized their own home for minimum human contact. She spoke to Emma in short, functional sentences. She did not ask questions. Emma found a job teaching art at an after-school program 20 minutes away. She didn't mention it. Isabella found out 3 weeks in when Emma came home with cadmium yellow on her left elbow. "You've been working?" Isabella was in the kitchen. She looked at the yellow. "I teach art, after-school program. Is that a problem? Is the arrangement financially—" "Emma works because I need to be useful, not because of money." Emma dried her hands. "Is that going to be a next week's briefing document or—" "There are no briefing documents," Isabella said, and something in her voice was different. Not warmer exactly, but less armored. She turned back to the counter. "There's soup in the pot." Emma looked at the pot. "Did you—" "Mrs. Huang, she made enough for 2. Mrs. Huang came on Tuesdays. Today was Thursday." Emma looked at the soup. She looked at Isabella's back. "Thank you," she said. Isabella didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. They ate at the counter, not quite together and not quite separate, while the city glittered below. The first real conversation happened in front of a painting, a charity gallery event. Emma in the green dress Isabella had sent without asking, which fit perfectly and which Emma was annoyed about and then wasn't. They stood in front of a large abstract piece, blues and greens, and Emma said without thinking, "It's not finished." Isabella glanced at her. It's a complete work. Look at the copper, Emma pointed to a smear in the lower left corner. It doesn't resolve. The artist brought it to the edge of something and then stopped. She tilted her head. Or couldn't. Silence. Then quietly, I've looked at that painting a dozen times. I never noticed the copper. Emma looked sideways at her. Isabella was studying the painting with an expression Emma hadn't seen before. Unguarded, genuinely absorbed, the CEO face temporarily offline. You have a Rothko in your study. You have several pieces in the study. The Rothko faces your desk, not the window, your desk. If it were an investment, you'd have it where the light hits it. You have it where you can see it while you work. Isabella turned to look at her then. Really look. Not the quick functional assessments Emma had grown used to, but something that went deeper, went longer. You're very observant, she said. It's the job. Looking is the job. They stood side by side in front of the unfinished copper, and the party moved around them, and nobody interrupted, and it was the first time in 4 months that the space between them felt like something other than distance. Victoria. Emma had known about Victoria Blake like you know about a storm system, by watching the horizon, by the way Isabella goes still whenever the name came near. She arrived on a Thursday, tall, blonde, green-eyed, and assembled with the precision of someone who had practiced being effortlessly formidable for so long it had become structural. She looked at Emma and smiled the smile of someone who has already decided the outcome. You must be Emma. I've heard so much about you. She hadn't heard anything and found it insufficient. Emma could read that in 4 words. I'm Victoria Blake, Isabella's colleague. The pause before colleague was a sentence. What followed was subtle and sustained and effective in the way that truly dangerous things often are. A gossip column. Who is Emma Carter really? What does Velmont's mysterious wife actually bring to the table? Whispers at company events. She married for the money, obviously. She approached Isabella, not the other way. She teaches children to draw. And then Victoria herself, alone with Emma in an elevator, pleasant as always. I only want to be honest because I care about Isabella. This arrangement, a glance at Emma's ring, it was never going to look like anything other than what it is, which is a transaction. You know it, I know it, eventually everyone will. A pause, timed like a blade. When this ends, people will remember. You will be remembered as the wife she paid for. The doors closed on Victoria's composed, patient face. Emma stood in the hallway and breathed. She was not wrong exactly. That was what made it effective.
The folder. Emma was looking for a pen. Just a pen, a Tuesday morning. She checked the kitchen drawer, the entry console, and then, because it was the only communal space left, she opened the top drawer of Isabella's study desk. No pen, but a folder. Her own name on the tab. Carter, Emma, medical. She opened it. The surgical bills from St. Michael's, she'd known about those. But then, a record of the family mortgage paid in full. Not just the outstanding amount, the entire principal. The house was her father's outright now. A letter from the insurance company confirming extended cardiac coverage through a supplemental plan initiated and funded by an unnamed third party. A settled employment claim against Riverside Middle School, money Emma had never received because it had quietly gone to a debt she hadn't known was being handled. She was still reading when the front door opened. Isabella stopped in the kitchen doorway when she saw Emma's face. You found it, she said. Why didn't you tell me? Isabella was quiet for a moment. Then, because you would have objected. Of course I would have. But your father needed continuity of care. I had the means. A pause. It didn't need to be a conversation. Emma looked at her. You did all of this and never once mentioned it. It wasn't done for acknowledgement. Then why? Isabella looked out the window at the afternoon city, and her voice lost some of its precision. She said, because it was the right thing to do, and she sounded, just for a moment, like a person rather than a position. Emma stood in the study with the folder in her hands and felt something shift in her chest that she didn't have language for yet. Thank you, she said. Isabella didn't answer, but she made tea, and she stayed in the kitchen, and they both drank it standing at the counter, and Emma thought about what it meant to do good things quietly and never ask to be thanked. closing the distance. January. Emma woke at 2 in the morning to find Isabella sitting at the piano in the dark. Not playing, hands resting on the keys, head bowed. Emma sat at the far end of the bench, an arm's length. "Do you play?" "I used to. My mother taught me." A single note in the dark, low and resonant. "She died when I was 19. "What was her name?" Isabella looked at her, surprised, maybe, that was the question. "Catherine." "Did she play often?" "Every night. She said it was how she thought." Isabella's hands settled, and she played, something minor and classical that Emma didn't recognize but felt immediately, in the chest, in the place that doesn't have a name. They sat at the piano while the city slept. Isabella played, Emma listened. The room was dark and warm, and the space between them felt for the first time like breathing room. February, a work trip to Osaka. Isabella had built gaps into the schedule, deliberate ones. "I assumed you'd want to see the city," she said, with careful neutrality, and Emma said, "I'd love to," and they walked through Dotonbori in the late afternoon, with the neon waking up around them, and Emma drew things in her sketchbook, and Isabella waited without impatience and looked at what she was drawing with genuine attention. They talked for 2 hours without stopping. Not easily. There was still weight to it, still the careful navigation of two people who were learning each other's borders, but continuous, alive. At the last night, there were fireworks, a local festival, unplanned. Emma looked up at the gold and white and deep watercolor blue blooming above them and felt that specific opening in the chest, the only one that happens in front of something beautiful. She turned to say something about it. Isabella was looking at her, not at the sky. At her, just for a moment. Then Isabella looked up at the fireworks, expression back in place, and Emma looked back at the sky and told herself she had imagined it. On the plane home, Isabella fell asleep. Emma sat beside her and noticed the angle of her head, her hands open in her lap, her face without its arrangement. She looked younger. She looked like whoever she'd been before she learned to be this. Emma pulled out her sketchbook. She drew Isabella's profile in the window light. She looked at the finished drawing for a long time. She turned the page. By March, she had stopped pretending she didn't know. She was in love with Isabella Velmont. She called Maya, her best friend since college, who listened to the full account and said, "Oh no. Yeah, how bad? I drew her on the plane while she was asleep. Emma, that's like writing someone's name in a notebook. That's extremely bad." A pause. "Tell her." She said not to expect feelings. It was in the contract. She said don't expect them. That's different from saying she doesn't have them. Emma pressed her forehead against the window. "I don't know if—" "Ask the question," Maya said, "before you decide you know the answer." The breaking. Victoria made her final move on a Tuesday, and she made it well. Emma's phone filled with messages. "Have you seen this?" And she opened the news alert to find Velmont CEO's mystery marriage exposed. Internal documents reveal paid arrangement. The documents were a contract that looked like the real one and wasn't. Her signature, Isabella's signature, language framing the marriage as image management, social performance, compensation for services rendered. Technically adjacent to truth, categorically designed to destroy. There was also a recording, Emma's voice and Isabella's, from their first night. "This marriage is only a contract," cut precisely to end there, in silence, removing the context, the room, the rest of the conversation. Remarkably done, patient and precise and thorough. Emma listened to it and thought about what Victoria had said in the elevator. "You're nothing but a wife she paid for." The thing about true things said in bad faith, they were still true. She had signed a contract, she had been paid, the arrangement had been, at its beginning, exactly what the article described. Whatever had grown since, the piano, the folder, the copper and the painting, the fireworks, the drawing on the airplane, none of it changed what it started as. She called Maya, who didn't answer. She sat for a long time. Then she packed the things that were hers, which was almost nothing, which had always been nothing, and when Isabella came home and found her in the hallway with a bag, Emma said, "The contract ends in July. I think I need to leave before that." Isabella said, "Emma." "Good night, Isabella," Emma said. She walked out.
The truth. She had been at Maya's apartment for 3 weeks when the call came. Rosa Marsh, Velmont Holdings Legal. "Miss Carter, I want to be clear, Isabella doesn't know I'm calling. What I'm about to tell you, I've been sitting on for 9 years, and I'm telling you now because I think you deserve to know. Emma sat down. 9 years ago, Rosa said, Isabella's car went off a road in the hills north of the city. Winter, late, a bad stretch of road. She was unconscious. She likely wouldn't have been found until morning. Emma was very still. A young woman saw it happen. She stopped. She pulled Isabella out of the car. She stayed for 40 minutes in the rain until the ambulance came. She gave her name to the paramedics and left before Isabella woke up. A pause. The name on the report was Emma Carter, 21 years old, art student. The room was very quiet. Isabella woke up and asked about you. Rosa continued. We found your contact information. By the time we had it, she had decided that reaching out would make it transactional, that you had done it because it was right, and that a thank you from a stranger would make it about her. A long pause. But she kept the report. She kept your name. When your father got sick, when you lost your job, she came to me and said she wanted to help. I suggested an anonymous donation. She said no. She made a contract. She made a contract because it was the only language she trusted, because it gave her a documented, airtight reason to be near you. Rose's voice was quiet. Isabella Velmont is one of the most capable people I know, and she is deeply, spectacularly bad at wanting things, at doing anything with her feelings, other than organizing them into structures that keep people at a safe distance. A pause. I've watched her be alone for a very long time. I'm tired of waiting for her to find the words. Emma sat in Maya's apartment for a long time after the call ended. Then she said, to Maya, who had appeared in the doorway, she pulled me out of a car. What? 9 years ago, on a road in the rain. She was unconscious and I pulled her out. Emma looked up. I didn't know who she was. I didn't remember. She stopped. She remembered. She's remembered my name for 9 years. Maya sat down. She didn't buy a wife. She made a contract so she could find a way to be near the person she... Emma, go. The choice. Victoria's final move happened before Emma could act. A press conference, a room full of reporters, and at the podium, Victoria Blake, composed and deliberate, presenting the real contract, not the fabricated one this time, the actual document with every clause and both their signatures, and saying into cameras, the public deserves to know that this marriage was purchased. Isabella stood at the side of the room. She hadn't been told about the event. Her face was contained, precise, the CEO face, giving nothing away. Emma saw it on her phone. She picked up her keys. The security guard in the lobby recognized her as Isabella's wife and let her through. She opened the door of the conference room and 300 people turned to look at her. Victoria stopped speaking. Emma walked to the podium. Victoria, very quietly, this isn't the time. Emma picked up the contract from the podium. She held it up so the room could see it, every page of it, the real document with her name on it. Then she tore it in half. The sound was sharp and clean in the silent room. I married her because I needed money, Emma said. Her voice was steady. She was looking at Isabella across the room, who had gone absolutely still. That's true. The contract was real, and I signed it for exactly the reasons it says, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. She let the pieces fall. But I'm here today because 3 weeks ago I walked out of her apartment, and I've been trying to convince myself that the beginning of a thing is the whole story. She stopped, started again. It isn't. The cameras were going. She didn't hear them. Today I choose her because I love her. Isabella Velmont, who had sat through 100 brutal rooms without flinching, who had built a reputation on being unreadable, who had organized her entire life around the careful management of what she felt and what she showed, stood at the side of a conference room with one tear running down the left side of her face. She didn't move to wipe it. Emma crossed the room. She stopped in front of Isabella. You could have just knocked on my door, Emma said softly. After the accident, 9 years ago, You could have just found me." "I know." Isabella's voice was quiet and stripped of its usual precision. "I didn't know what to say." "What would you have said?" A long pause. Then, "What I should have said a long time ago." Isabella's eyes held her. "I love you. I have been trying to find a way to say that for 9 years, and I chose the most convoluted possible method, and I'm aware of how—" Emma took her face in both hands. Isabella stopped talking. "Say it again. Just that part." "I love you," Isabella said, simply, like something that had been waiting a long time to be let out. Emma kissed her. Behind them, the room erupted in something: cameras, voices, movement. Victoria Blake said something that neither of them heard. Emma held Isabella's face and felt the specific quality of being kissed back by someone who has been holding something in for 9 years. The flowers were yellow. 30 guests. Maya in the front row, crying exactly as loudly as Emma had always imagined. Her father beside her, eyes bright, losing the battle with composure 4 minutes in. Emma walked down the aisle of a garden behind a restaurant they had been to once, early in the contract days, and she looked at Isabella waiting for her in cream, soft, precise, completely hers, and thought, there it is. There it is. When her turn came for vows, she looked at Isabella and said, "When I first saw you, I thought, unreadable, closed. This is going to be efficient and hard, and then it's going to end. And then you made soup and waited with me in front of a painting and cried at a press conference in front of 300 reporters, and I understood I was wrong." A pause. "You're not closed. You're just quiet in a way that takes patience to hear. I want to spend the rest of my life being patient enough to hear you." Isabella cried again. She had gotten slightly better at it since the press conference. Slightly. She read her own vows in a voice steadier than it had any right to be, about structures and the spaces inside them, about a woman who left paint on her elbow like punctuation, about a name on a paramedic's report that she had kept in her desk for 9 years and carried like some people carry photographs. They exchanged rings, the same rings as the first wedding. Emma had kept hers when she left. She had admitted this to Isabella 3 months ago, and Isabella had looked at her and said nothing, then held her hand for a long time. "You may kiss the bride." They did. Later, in the quiet corner of the garden, Isabella held Emma's hand and looked at the yellow flowers. "I would have knocked," she said. "Eventually. 9 years is a long eventually. I was working up to it." A pause. "I had a draft." Emma laughed. "You wrote a draft?" "Several. They were technically proficient and emotionally incoherent." Isabella's mouth curved, the real smile, the one Emma had learned to read in fragments before she got to see it whole. "I eventually concluded that no document was adequately going to address the situation. So you made a contract instead." "So I made a contract instead." Emma leaned into her. Isabella's arm came around her, without hesitation, without the old careful distance. "For what it's worth," Emma said, "it worked." Isabella pressed her lips to Emma's hair. "Noted," she said, "for future reference." The garden was warm. Their people laughed around them. The city hummed somewhere beyond the walls, indifferent and enormous, full of roads in the rain and names on paramedics' reports, and all the strange, convoluted routes that people take towards each other when they are determined enough and afraid enough, and finally, brave enough.